Well, my name is Elias. I'm the Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Archdiocese of Denver. And again, it's a great joy to be able to welcome you to our shared ministry of Catholic education here in the Archdiocese. And many of you are coming, again, new to the Archdiocese, new to Catholic education perhaps. For some of you, it's a return trip. So we do want to take just a moment to recognize where you're coming from and how it is that the Lord has brought you to our Catholic schools. And so I'm going to invite, when you identify with the following group, to please stand so that we can recognize you. But those of you that are brand new to teaching, period, please stand. Let's give them a round of applause. Welcome. Thank you. Those of you that are coming from the public sector, whether public schools, charter schools, but public education, and joining us in our Catholic educational ministry for the first time, please stand. We're so excited to have your gifts in our Catholic schools. And everyone else maybe that is joining us in a variety of different ways, whether you started in Catholic education and then went away and then are coming back now, or if your path was a different one. But please stand if you have not been mentioned yet. And welcome to our Catholic schools as well. So regardless of how it is that you arrive to Catholic education and the Archdiocese of Denver Catholic schools, know that you are joining a group of men and women, a community of educators and professionals that are deeply committed to a formation and understanding of the human person and an education of the child, of young men and women that is distinct than anything else that we have available to us. And so I guess I want to open this first just reflection. And our day today really is going to be grounded in steeping you in the vision and philosophy of Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Denver, of Catholic education, what's at the heart of the church for Catholic education and the formation of the human person. And then this afternoon, we'll get into perhaps a little bit more of the nuts and bolts and logistics about what it means to work for the Archdiocese of Denver Catholic schools. But the question I'd like to pose to start: if you were to remove the crucifixes from the walls in our Catholic schools, and you were to strip any sign of sacred images, symbols of our faith, any sign of our connection to Christianity or the Catholic Church, if you were to pack up all the Bibles, all the religion books, take Mass out of our routine, take Mass out of our daily routine and structure, would a stranger that walks into our Catholic schools be able to see or hear something that would lead them to conclude that what is happening in our classrooms, in the walls of our schools, is fundamentally different than what's taking place in the non-religious school across the street? A rhetorical question for us to think about. Now, perhaps your thought process immediately goes to, well, yeah, we have uniforms. Well, charter schools have uniforms now too. It's become quite a thing to have now in public and charter schools. Or perhaps you're thinking, well, values, right? We can teach kindness and respect and love for others. Character development. Well, we know the public sector has that as well now and uses actually the same language to some extent. So as you're pondering that question, let's visualize two classrooms, two science classrooms, one in a Catholic school and another in a public school. And for argument's sake, let's say that the Catholic schools and public school are exactly the same. And then let's say that the science teachers in both of these classrooms bring out very similar human blood samples for the students to look at and explore. And students are taught how to use the microscope in virtually the same way. Let's say that they're both really lucky schools and just received this amazing grant to have an electron microscope where you can look very deeply at the blood samples. As both sets of students start to look deeply and closely through the microscope, they see this cluster of red blood cells. And they see the tiny red blood cells up close, but with an electron microscope, if you're familiar with those, they're actually able to go even deeper. And they're talking about their observations with their teacher and with one another, and they're learning about the purpose of the red blood cell. in the immune system, but also just in the general biology of the human body. Now, this lesson on red blood cells then leads them to enter into a lesson on just human cells and human cell structure in general. And they're shown these pictures of chromosomes, the carriers of DNA molecules that have the very specific instructions that make human beings the individual, unique persons that they are. And as the students are marveling at what they're seeing under the microscope, and they're learning about their makeup, their cellular, biological makeup, they ask the question, why is it like this? How did this come to be the way that it is? Now let's visualize 2 math classrooms. I was a teacher for 12 years in this archdiocese. I taught 5th grade self-contained classroom for 3 years, and then did middle school theology, catechesis, and math. And how many are familiar with the Fibonacci sequence or Fibonacci numbers? Okay, we have a few. Oh, wow. So the Fibonacci sequence or Fibonacci numbers are something that I'd love to teach to my 8th grade algebra class. But both classrooms, let's say in these 2 math classrooms, are learning about the Fibonacci sequence. So what's the Fibonacci sequence if you're not familiar with it? Well, it's a sequence of numbers that was introduced to the Western world by a Leonardo da Pisa in his 13th century book, Liber Abaci, not to be confused with Liberace, Liber Abaci. A book that many credit as the foundation for modern mathematical methods that we use in the West today. And in fact, this sequence predates him. It goes back as far as the Indian Sanskrits. It also goes back, the first written record that we have in documentation of this sequence goes back as far as 250 BC. But de Pisa, who's now just more commonly referred to as Fibonacci, used this sequence to calculate the growth of rabbit population. And if you can do basic addition, then you can come up with the sequence pretty easily. And you start with 0 and you start with 1. So it's pretty simple, right? If you follow along with me, 0 plus 1 makes, 1 plus 1 makes, 2 plus 1 makes 3, and so on and so forth. And that's how you get this sequence. Okay, cool pattern, right? You're thinking, so what's so special about it? Well, if you start diving into the sequence by the numbers that come before it, dividing numbers in the sequence by the numbers that come before it, you start to see the result of a number that gets closer and closer to this decimal at the bottom here, 1.61803398887 to infinity. This is known as the golden ratio, a number that really has fascinated people over the ages, mathematicians, a number that many consider a mechanism to form, to creation, and to patterns in the universe. Now, we can take the Fibonacci numbers a bit further, and let's say that you were to take the first 7 numbers in the sequence together and put it in a shape. You take a 1 by 1 square and put it next to another 1 by 1, and you get a 1 by 2 rectangle. You keep going and you get this 3 by 2 and 5 by 3 and 8 by 5, etc., and it just keeps going to infinity. Let's say that then you start to connect the opposite corners of the squares with quarter circles, and you start getting this spiral that just keeps expanding further and further, which we call the Fibonacci spiral. And as the Fibonacci numbers go to infinity, we get what we call the golden spiral, because the growth factor of this spiral is the golden ratio, 1.6180 to infinity. Here's what's been fascinating to people about this sequence and about the Fibonacci spiral. The Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, has been found to be expressed in many things across the universe. It's been found in the number of leaves on petals along the stem of a plant. In fact, plant spirals in the rose in particular have been found to be a fraction made of successive Fibonacci numbers all getting closer to the golden ratio. It's been found in the arrangement of the spirals of galaxies, natural logarithmic spirals getting closer to the golden ratio. Same with the development of spirals in hurricanes. The sequence and rectangles of the golden ratio have been used in design, in art, in posters, in ads, in architecture, because of the visual appeal. It produces something that's visually appealing, stimulating, and beautiful. Now, we do have to be cautious, because as soon as you start saying that the golden spiral or Fibonacci sequence is in everything, right, we could tend to exaggerate, because it isn't in everything, and some people have tried to prove that's in everything. But galaxies and flowers is one thing. But Sylvester Stallone, if Stallone's face was composed of golden ratios and spirals, that's what it would look like on the right there. But in fact, that's probably what he looked like at the end of every Rocky movie that he was in. But in the science class, going back to the science class and going back to this math class that we have been visualizing, as they are in awe of these findings, of these mathematical patterns, or of these things that they're seeing through the microscope, as they're discovering and as they're learning, they continue to ask the question, why is it like this? How did this come to be? This is, I think, where we start to see the difference between what a authentically Catholic education has to offer. And this is with total respect for those colleagues of ours who are in public education and continue to be there, or those of you that were in public education, because we know there's a lot of good people that work in public schools. But in public school at best, how would they respond to this question of why is it like this, or how did this come to be? Students might, in that setting, might be told that this is the result of a random occurrence in the universe, the result of an accident, the result of random evolution, a cool cosmic coincidence that just is taking place in creation, with no real point of origin, no real order, really, an accident. But in Catholic schools, our students have the opportunity to be led out, to see in these cells, to see in these chromosomes, to see in the universe, in the orders and logic of mathematics, the genius behind the creation. They are able to see and be led to see in the cells the imprint of a loving God who has created all things, most especially them as male and female in his image and likeness, imprinting on them from the moment that they were the tiniest cell, his will for their life as cherished sons and daughters for whom he has a great plan and a great purpose. In our Catholic schools, students have an opportunity to be led out to see in the mathematical patterns the order and the logic that God has used to create the universe. A God who uses beautiful patterns and beautiful sequences to reveal through nature his genius, his greatness. That our students, through the use of their reason, might be able to come to know and discover who God is, because they are discovering the mind of God present in the things that he has created. And thus, through discovering who God is through creation, that they might come to love him because they see him in all things, because they will see the imprint and mark of the God, of the loving God that has made it all for us, for them. But then comes the question that every teacher loves to hear from their students. Well, why do I have to learn this? How will this help me in life? How will this be useful to me? So how should a Catholic school respond? How should a Catholic educator respond to that question? Well, you need skills so you can get a good job and be successful in life. You need science and math because without them you can't graduate from high school and you can't get into college. And then if you don't get into college and graduate from college, you're not going to get a good job or a good career. Plus, the best paying jobs are in science, engineering, and technology. So if you really stick with that, then you'll make millions. Otherwise, you're going to end up a teacher like me. That's actually what one of my teachers told me, believe it or not. The educational establishment has determined that education is only valuable if it has a useful purpose. A useful purpose for individuals, a useful purpose for the workforce. Schools have fallen in line then with that mindset of what is the ultimate outcome of education. Production. And they've made it clear where the priorities lie by what they focus on. College and career. So the modern educational establishment really has just become obsessed with college and career readiness. And as such, a child's worth has been defined by how much they are going to get out of their education. And in turn, a child's worth has been defined by how much they are able to produce for the workforce, for society. And because of that, students have come to believe that the purpose of education then is just to get into a good college, just to have a good career, to make lots of money, because that's ultimately what's going to make them very happy in life. Now, I think there's some of you here who education is your second career, and can attest to how this is not at all what the point or purpose of education is. I personally think that this is what is at the heart of the educational crisis in the United States today. Now, don't get me wrong. Do we want kids to excel academically? Absolutely. Do we want them to be proficient in their academic skills? And do we want them to have the academic competencies that they need to be successful? Most certainly. Do we want them to advance in their academic careers and studies and then go on to healthy and rewarding careers? Most certainly. That's the commitment that we make to families that we will do for them as well. But this is where we discover that Catholic schools are more than you realize. Catholic education is more than what the world realizes, and how we are fundamentally a different form of education. Because we just don't want academic success for kids. We just don't want career readiness for kids. We want more from them because they deserve more as human people. And fortunately for us, what's at the heart of the church for the education and for the formation of the human person is the answer to the crisis of education that we see in the United States today. In perhaps one of the most significant church documents on education that's been written, a little-known document, the encyclical Divini Ilius Magistri, written by Pope Pius XI in 1929, in many ways captures really what's at the heart of the education and formation for the human person, but also in many ways predicted where the modern educational establishment would take education. And he wrote, "Many pretend to draw education out of human nature itself and evolve it by its own unaided powers. Such easily fall in error because instead of fixing their gaze on God, first principle and last end of the whole universe, they fall back upon themselves, becoming attached exclusively to passing things on earth. And thus their restlessness will never cease until they direct their attention and their efforts to God, the goal of all perfection." It's beautiful. This is 1929. And have you noticed how restless the world is today? The tragedy that we see around us in the world today is one of the greatest indicators of just the restlessness of humanity. And if education does not first point students to God and allow them to encounter Jesus, in whom we see the perfection of human nature, then they will remain restless people, seeking purpose, seeking meaning, seeking what will bring happiness to their lives in passing things, in temporal things, in earthly things that will never bring them happiness, but instead will bring them more worry, more anxiety, more restlessness. It's also why Pope Pius XI goes on to say that there can be no true education, therefore, which is not wholly directed to man's last end. The church calls our Catholic schools to lead our students out of these passing earthly things and lead them towards God. In God, who they will find their purpose, and towards Jesus, who is capable of perfecting our flawed, our fragile human nature. This is true education. And our Catholic schools are more than you realize, not because of what we help students to do, but rather because of the people that we help them to be. Our Catholic schools are more than you realize because this doesn't just happen in the religion classroom. This happens in math, in science, in history, in English, in every dimension of the academic and educational program and enterprise. The worth of our schools, and more importantly, the worth of our kids then, is not based in our Catholic schools, it's not based on what colleges they're going to go to. It's not based on what careers they will have. We will take pride in the successes that they see there. But their worth is based on so much more. As Catholic schools and as Catholic educators, we will be judged by the Lord for how many seeds of discipleship we have sowed and we have laid, and if we have laid properly the foundation for our students to live in truth and to ultimately make it to heaven. What would compel families? What would compel them to pay hundreds and thousands of dollars over the lifespan of their children's educational careers for something that they could potentially get free somewhere else? if not for a school experience, if not for an educational experience where their children and where their worth and their dignity as young men and women created in the image and likeness of God will be honored and protected. Schools where they will have the guarantee that the school will not take the place of the parents as the primary educator, but support them and partner with them and protect their children from all moral, physical, psychological, and spiritual harm. Where the school will work with the family and with the church to create one sanctuary of education that is mutually beneficial and essential for the proper development of society and for the world. And this is why our Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Denver exist. They exist to support parents in forming their children as faithful and virtuous disciples of Jesus Christ who are fully alive and serve the common good. This is our charter. This is what animates what we do at our schools. And this doesn't come from a model or some kind of model or educational trend or fad. This comes from the timeless teaching that is at the heart of the Catholic Church, made present today in 2019. And the modern utilitarian approaches to education, where it's just about production, it's just about how well kids do on test scores, it's just about college, it's just about career, have fallen short. And it's time that we as Catholic schools and Catholic educators embrace the opportunity to give to the world this rightly ordered vision for education and for the formation of the human person, rooted in the Church's long-standing vision. The why of our schools, if you will, is not just something that comes from an agenda, but it's truly to form young men and women as disciples of Jesus Christ. The Church asks of us, of our schools, and of all of us as Catholic educators, to provide an educational experience that rigorously forms the soul, the intellect, the body, and the heart, so that our students can be freed, truly free people, liberated from the bondage of the secular and relativist world that they're living in, and thus free to live virtuous lives in service of God, the Church, and in service of others. And so our students must be formed in truth so that they can be rightly ordered, creative, and disciplined thinkers, inquirers, problem solvers, men and women ultimately of tomorrow who are going to restore to American society and to American culture the conviction that we can grasp truth and we can know truth, and that ultimately truth is what will set us free. And inevitably what will happen is that this formation will prepare our young men and women to be exceptional students, ready for their academic futures, exceptional members of the workforce who will stand above their peers because they will have the ability to rightly reason. In short, if we had to describe them, the profile of a Catholic school graduate, or if you will, our student learning expectations from their time with us from preschool through 12th grade, it would be this: that our students will be supernatural men and women who think, judge, and act with right reason, illuminated by the supernatural light of the example and teaching of Christ. And if we have the conviction then that Jesus is more than just a great prophet or man that lived on this world 2 millennia ago, and if we truly believe that he is the Son of God and that Jesus is the heart of what we do in our schools, if it is he that truly illuminates and animates our efforts, our teaching, our schools, then we have no choice but to have the audacity to see in our schools not just a program that's an alternative to other forms of education, not just a program that's an alternative to the public, charter, or private non-religious school, but something that is fundamentally and radically different. And because of that, if I'm bold enough to say that ultimately better for the formation of children. That what we have to offer in our schools is a vision for humanity that is best for kids and best for the world. And you are joining a team that has this conviction that what we do on a daily basis is good work, is the right work, and is best for kids.
We all have certain images that come to mind when we think about the average school. Gaining knowledge, transmitting skills, values, and beliefs, and passing these things on to future generations. But what are the issues American school systems are struggling with today?
Some troubling numbers coming out. It's a new study on education.
At what point do endless programs aimed at mitigating dropout rates and bullying actually become an admission that the environment at these schools is not conducive to our children's success? When students organize walkouts to protest curriculum or safety issues, should we not question whether these students have lost confidence in the adults running the system? When the school system enters into things as personal as sexual ethics and promotes gender ideologies, is this not proof that the state is motivated to replace the parents as primary educators of our children? We've made education awfully complicated and incredibly expensive. But if we don't understand the roots of these problems, no amount of your tax dollars will create a solution. So what do parents actually want out of their children's education?
I think the purpose of education is to form the child in virtue.
To ignite curiosity.
Prepare your children for life.
I want the teachers to speak to the heart of my children.
To make the world a better place.
Physical security has been important, of course, in this kind of crazy world.
I just want them to be well-adjusted, good people.
One thing is clear. Now is the time to get back to the basics. This is why Catholic education is irreplaceable in the world today. Most people know we have higher test scores, graduation rates, and observable self-discipline. Those are simply results of an entirely different view of education. We educate the whole person to learn the whole truth for the whole of their life. We've been led to believe that an education is all about getting a great job, and that this is what leads to happiness. But parents know better than that. True happiness comes from something much deeper. It's the properly integrated person who experiences true happiness. We recognize that schools are simply a loving and safe community of individuals who put their faith in action in service and support of the work parents are doing as the primary educators of their children.
We don't keep track of what we're against, but we are eager to tell you what we are for. Now more than ever, we urge you to find a Catholic community near you and ask about your education options. Our community works with parents to help make Catholic education affordable. There are great people in every school, and any one of them can help you see what the microscope reveals on the slide. But only some schools will teach you how to see, how to look beyond the thing itself and contemplate the beautiful truths present in all created things. And most importantly, the genius behind it all.
I like to think that we live in a moment where we're being invited and we're being tasked with the opportunity to provide our communities, the families and the children that we serve, the opportunity to create a Catholic school program, to create an educational experience in our classrooms where we are beacons of hope for the world, where we are inserting hope into the lives of our families and our children, shining examples of what true education should be. Schools that boldly and unabashedly stand with and for Christ and for the church. Voices that are crying out in the modern wilderness today. Proclaiming this vision of the human person that defies the flawed and the distorted vision that the modern world holds of the human person as being this being that by his or her own unaided powers defines who they are, what they are, and thus makes their own truth. Schools where all children, regardless of where they're from or their parents' country of origin or what language they speak at home or what neighborhood they're from, can come to experience this transformational love and mercy of Jesus Christ in real and powerful ways through their interactions with us and the school community, even if they do get under our skin every now and then. Schools that do everything that they can to support families and students by creatively evangelizing and working to empower our parents as the primary educators and working to strengthen the family unit as well. Schools that believe ultimately that all children are capable of learning and do everything they can to support the growth and learning of every single child. Never putting in excuses, but always looking for the opportunity and the growth and the potential that's inherent in every single child. In 2015, our Archbishop Aquila, gave us this beautiful vision for our schools, and a vision document titled Worthy of the Name. And in this document, he laid out this vision of what excellence looks like in our schools. Schools that are on mission to form disciples of Jesus Christ. Schools that are committed to excellence, academic excellence, programmatic excellence. Schools that are accessible to all children and families, and schools that are sustainable for the future. And so we invite you today, as we begin this day, but also as you begin your time as teachers in the Archdiocese of Denver, to be a part of this Christ-centered community. We thank you for saying yes to the Lord in taking on this task of Catholic education, this mission of Catholic education. And we invite you to help us continue to form this sanctuary of education in your classrooms, in your daily interactions with your students. That through those things, they may come into deeper relationship with God, with Jesus, and through the church. And we invite you to commit to providing an excellent academic foundation where faith and reason intersect, and where students will come to encounter God through all their subjects and through all the disciplines. We invite you to commit and join us in being a community of disciples, teachers, principals, parents, benefactors, volunteers who together are taking on this work. That you're not alone in carrying out this mission and this task, but rather you are a part of a community that is convicted of this work. Our Catholic schools, our archdiocese, our church, and more importantly, our families and our students need teachers, need educators that fully believe that our Catholic schools and Catholic education is more than you realize. Because ultimately, what we are doing is forming saints for the future. This is what's best for kids. Thank you.